Hello, and welcome to A Novel Talk. I'm Carl Lee, and my co host, Wendy Kendall, produce this podcast where we interview various authors from a wide variety of genres. I'm especially excited today because, as a paranormal writer, we have a paranormal author as our guest. My current novel is a book one of the Brenda McCoy Witch Detective series, and I'm very excited to get that underway. Wendy?
Hi, I'm Wendy Kendall, cozy mystery author. Now available is my brand new romance, Heart of Christmas Cookies and Dreams. Liz buried her hopes 3 years ago when she buried her husband. Her dream to run her own bakery shelved, along with dreams of love. She hides behind a corporate desk, struggling for time with her young son and his grandmother, Violet. George is chef at the assisted living facility where Violet recovers from an accident. His adopted beagle, Phil, is George's only family and a therapy dog for the residents. Violet plays matchmaker, plotting a cookie bake at the facility kitchen. Her plans put George's job at risk. Then tail wagger Phil suddenly disappears. How can they all discover the heart of Christmas and find the ribbons of love that run through it? And the delicious cookie recipe is included. I'm so excited for you to read this sweet romance story. And also for the holiday season, my romantic suspense, Snow Kiss Cookies to Die For. Finalist for Best Suspense at Killer Nashville. It's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all online retailers, as are all my books. Find out more on my website, wendywritesbooks.com. Thank you to all the readers who've let me know how much you enjoy my books. Carl?
Yes, thank you for letting us read those lovely books too, Wendy. As I said, I'm very excited to have Mark Rosendorf, award-winning author, as our guest, as he is a author of paranormal fiction. Mark holds a master's degree from Long Island University in human development and leadership. He is a licensed guidance counselor for New York City Department of Education Special Education District. He began counseling back in September of 2001. Prior to that, he was in the hospitality industry, working in a hotel. Mark's writing is based on his personality, and his experiences he's come through throughout his life, coupled with his own wild, if it could only be that way, imagination. He is an author of the young adult series, The Witches of Vegas, numbering 4 titles to date, with a 5th coming soon. He is also credited with the Rasner Effect series, a supernatural thriller trilogy published between 2009 and 2012. The Witches of Vegas is a recipient of the prestigious Roan Award in 2021's young adult category, which is run by Indie Tale magazine. He also placed second in the young adult category of the International Digital Awards. Journey to New Salem, very good book, is a Roan Award finalist in 2 categories, young adult and audiobook. Welcome to A Novel Talk, Mark Rosendorf.
Thank you very much, Carl and Wendy. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward. I believe this is my first time on your show, so I'm very much looking forward to the experience.
First time and hopefully not the last, the way that your series grow, Mark. It's just so exciting to have you here. In your first book of the series, The Witches of Vegas, Isis Rivera is a teenage girl with an extraordinary childhood. Can you tell us a little about her adoption and the family that adopted her?
Okay, well, technically, yeah. She's the adopted daughter of the Witches of Vegas, although technically she was never actually adopted. she was found. She was with a foster family, and all of a sudden, her Wiccan abilities triggered. She was 9 years old, which is actually in the Witches of Vegas world, very young for a witch to suddenly, for their powers to manifest. And of course, they became very scared when they saw it happen. They saw it as the devil being in her, and they tried to cure her by lighting her on fire.
Oh, God.
That's when the Witches of Vegas came, rescued her, because they sensed this powerful witch, realizing she's very young, and they took it upon themselves to train her, and then ended up adopting her, and they ended up becoming a family together.
Thank goodness. And the fun and delights of magic really come across in this book. A natural instinct for you, I imagine, after having moonlighted as a professional magician. Can you tell us a little about your love of magic and what inspired this series? And also, do you have a favorite magic trick?
Well, let me answer the last question first. Yes, I have a favorite magic trick. It's actually in the book, because the Witches of Vegas focuses on two different stories. Both the witches who are in Vegas, masquerading as magicians, and the magicians who cannot possibly keep up with this amazing show. So if you follow the magicians, you will see my favorite trick. Yes, I was a professional magician all throughout college and moved on. I don't do magic now, but I teach it to my students. I work with high school students with special needs, and I build confidence, team building, etc. by having them on stage, teaching them magic, all part of our performing arts program, and having them perform, builds them up on stage. So it was one night about 2:00 in the morning. I was thinking about how much work goes into these shows, how much practice, how much training, and to the audience, it might as well just be witchcraft. And that's when it occurred to me, wow, that's a great concept for a story. I got to find that. So I went on Amazon, looked to find a book that did this, and found nobody had. The next few nights, it was almost like a bullet to the brain. The ideas just kept popping in there. Who's the main characters? What's the story? What's the magicians look like? Who are the witches? What's going on in the story? And it just started coming together. Like, I knew it was going to be young adult, and I knew the main characters were going to be the 15-year-olds, but they was going to put enough adult characters in there as well. And everything just came together. It was 2 a.m. for the next 3 nights, where I'm just taking down notes under the bed with the light, trying not to wake my wife. Sometimes it's successful. And the whole story just came together, and before I knew it, I had the Witches of Vegas in my hands.
It really is an extraordinary concept. And I may not be a young adult, I may be an old adult, but I loved it. It's just so good. Yes. And what happens in Vegas, we all know, stays in Vegas. But in Witches of Vegas, there's an evil force that's hovering over the city and threatening the world, too. Can you tell us about this imminent danger?
Yes, I can. The Witches of Vegas is not just about witches. There's also vampires there, too, although they're few and far between. The Witches of Vegas's mentor is a 500-year-old vampire who has spent generations, they spent generations training witches for an imminent threat that he felt could come at any time. And these witches came and gone, and the threat never came. Well, the fact that these are the witches in this story means the threat is coming, and it's a threat from the vampire's past, who's coming with a grudge against him and humanity. And that is the threat that's coming.
And it's dire.
Yes, and it's a running theme throughout, and it's going to be up to Isis Rivera, who's the 15-year-old witch, and Zach Galloway, the 15-year-old magician's assistant, who's going to somehow have to bring their families together to confront this threat if it's not already too late.
They are a great pair together, too. Gambling on Vegas. Can you talk a little about what's important when writing about this famous setting?
Funny you should ask that. When I was writing this, because it was going to be about magic, I knew that the setting had to be Vegas, because Vegas is the capital of magic. And while I was writing this, we took a family vacation to Las Vegas. we stayed in Caesars because that's in the center of the strip, and I spent the time going back and forth, walking the strip, taking the notes, taking in the whole environment. Went to a whole bunch of shows, and I took everything I learned from this trip and I put in the books. This way, Vegas, the strip would almost feel like a separate character in the book, which was very important for me because of how much I before the trip, even afterwards, I loved Vegas so much. I really wanted to show in this story.
It's so visual the way that you write it too. It's just like you say. It is like it's a character in the story, and it's just so vivid and you all your senses. It comes through that feeling of Vegas. It's really phenomenally written.
It all came from that trip because I was loving. All my senses were exploding while I was walking the strip, and I was just taking notes on everything, not just what I saw, but how I felt, what I heard, everything.
Well, as a frequent visitor of the strip, I can tell you that it came alive for me as memory of visits that I had already had. So well done.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, Mark, in your novel, A Journey to New Salem, we're going to switch to book 2 now. The Witches of Vegas used their powers to perform a stage show in Vegas. This is an excellent, thank you, example of hiding in plain sight. But why did the patriarch of the witches, Sebastian, choose such a public hiding spot?
Well, as you said, it was hiding in plain sight. And by the way, this is also the concept for book 1 and 2, actually throughout most of the series, that he feels, witches are known for being hunted. If the public ever found out that witchcraft existed, it would cause all sorts of, outrage, all sorts of fear. But however, when you go to a magic show, you're expected to be fooled. You're expected to see amazing things happen. So he saw it as a great place, this Vegas stage, to practice their magic, to practice their witchcraft, and to the audience, it's just going to look like magic. So that was where his idea came from, to be on stage, and people will be amazed, and because it's magic, they expect to be amazed, and no one will ever be the wiser. If you notice in the book, he even kept saying, "How can we do this? We're witches," and the audience just accepted it as,
yep.
Right. That's their gimmick. They're playing witches, when in reality, they are witches.
Right.
Hiding in plain sight.
Yeah, and so well done too. Speaking of hiding, Sebastian's coven discover the existence of a village. However, they have to rely on Zach, the magician's apprentice, who has no Wiccan abilities, to find the village of New Salem. Tell us a little bit about New Salem. Describe it. Tell us about the people and its history without giving too much away.
Okay, so New Salem has existed for hundreds of years. It was discovered by witches hundreds of years ago, and it was a place for witches from around the world to escape persecution and escape being hunted by going here. Now it's hundreds of years later, and a lot of the original families, their descendants still live there. So the village is, half of them are witches, half of them aren't. They're either relatives or descendants of witches.
Mm-hmm.
And it stands where the ley lines are, where their power is very strong, and they're able to stay hidden and actually have their own society, their own government, their own basically world in this in this village, which is well hidden, and just live together, not have to worry about being hunted, being persecuted, or being seen as different.
Yes. Zach helps them find this hidden village because of a very interesting ailment that Isis has. Can you tell us a little bit more about her situation?
Well, the main premise of Journey to New Salem is that Isis starts developing seizures. And one thing that's established is here, the witch. You see, the witchcraft is very different than other witches. I use the Carl Jung theory. I don't know if you're familiar with synchronicity. Carl Jung, who was a psychiatrist from the Sigmund Freud days, who believed the world is made of energy, and we can actually control that energy. So when someone has deja vu, or if a mother lifts a car off of their baby, in that moment, they're unconsciously tapping into the energy, and he felt with enough focus, we can consciously tap into it. I said, wow, that maybe he's talking about witchcraft. And that's the development of the witches. So in the case of New Salem, as I said, these are a lot of different witches that our witches meet for the first time. I'm sorry, what was your question again?
It was about Isis's ailment.
Okay, that's right. Okay, so Isis starts having unexplained seizures, and the seizure happens in the brain, which is also where the witch's connection comes from. So every time she has this seizure, it causes her Wiccan connection of her control of the energy to suddenly spiral out of control. So her seizures will cause hurricanes, they'll cause earthquakes, they'll cause fire, and with each seizure, it gets worse and worse. So the witches were her family, which by the way consists of Sebastian Santel, his wife Selena Quinn, and her sister Sasha Quinn. They are unable to help Isis. They can't understand why, and they realize the only thing they can do as she's getting worse and worse is they have to find help elsewhere, some other sort of expertise on witches. Unfortunately, you go on Google, you're not exactly going to see expert on witches, phone number and address. So they knew about this, they knew rumors of this fabled village of witches. And as you mentioned earlier, Zach is the one who is not a witch. He's the one who's able to find them, which you'll find out during New Salem, because while the witches tend to very much use their witchcraft, Zach, on the other hand, he's a magician. He has a lot of ingenuity and a lot of other options available to him.
Yep, we have to rely on our own personal strengths.
Right.
Zach is not a witch, but he is part of the family. He is part of the show. What can you tell us about his relationship with Isis and with the Coven at large?
Well, it changes throughout the story. Originally, Zach is the nephew of the amazing Herb Galloway, who was the last real magician left in Vegas. All the rest, because they just could not compete with the Witches show, took off and left Vegas, which makes sense because they're using witchcraft. It's very amazing, but for most magicians to be that amazing, it takes a lot of money, a lot of know-how of building everything, a lot of time, effort goes into it, while the witches just use their power, so they couldn't keep up with them. Herb Galloway, on the other hand, stayed because he couldn't afford to leave and was on his way to being kicked out of his own theater. So Zach, due to situations, comes from the book, tries to befriend Isis to try to get information, and the two and then end up falling for each other, and that's when Zach and his uncle realize they're being had, and that's they're being manipulated, and then all of a sudden that's when, as we mentioned earlier, Luther's former enemy comes into Vegas, and now they got to bring the families together, and through this, Isis and Zach grow very close with one another.
Yes, you mentioned family. Family is a very important theme in Journey to New Salem. You have Sebastian and his coven with the two adopted members, Zach and Isis. You have Valeria, who you just mentioned, and Luther, the mentor for Sebastian's family. And you also have the people of New Salem, who are descendant of family, and they are family members themselves. Talk to us a little bit about the differences in these families, and more intriguing, how they're similar.
Well, as you said, it is definitely about family, and it's not always traditional family, it's also found family. Isis is adopted into the Witches of Vegas, she automatically becomes a member of their family. New Salem, because they're small, sees everybody, that's in the village as family. In fact, one of the laws of New Salem is that when anybody comes to New Salem, they have to drop their last name. Everybody goes by first name. And through family, of course, what's their goal is to protect one another. So when threats, like as you said, Luther, the vampire's big threat is Valeria. When she's there, it's not just about beating her, it's also about protecting one another as family.
Right. Because that's what family does.
Of course.
So I know our listeners would love to hear a brief reading from one of your awesome books. Would you mind?
I was prepared for that, absolutely.
Awesome.
So I'm going to take you to the Witches of Vegas. We're going to go in the middle of chapter 1. And they're on the stage. Sebastian is the host speaking into the microphone. His wife Selena, her sister Sasha, just did an amazing act. And now we're backstage. Get ready, Isis. You're up next. Selena gave her a wink. Isis returned the gesture with a smile. Oh, kiddo will be fine out there. She's ready, Sasha said. But first, it's all you, big sis. And don't forget to smile to the audience. I never forget to smile. Selena rolled her eyes. You did during last night's performance. Last night I was agitated. I asked Sebastian if our new outfits made me look fat. His answer struck me as non-committal. You know the two of you make me sick, right? Sasha turned to Isis. Don't they make you sick sometimes? Isis just offered Sasha a slight shrug. There were certain family squabbles where she felt it best to play it neutral. Sasha did have a point. Selena and Sebastian flirted with each other a lot. Isis actually found it sweet. Selena stood up and closed her eyes. Teleport to box. She disappeared. The box lowered to the ground while Sebastian continued his patter. No doors on any side of the box. Not above, not below. No way in, no way out. And yet, the front of the box fell onto the stage, revealing Selena behind it. Sebastian took her hand and led her out. With magic and witchcraft, we don't need doors. The crowd roared with applause. Selena curtsied, then trotted off the stage. She exchanged a thumbs up with Sasha. Their magic proved flawless as always. How did she do that? Someone shouted from the front row. Isis giggled. She'd witnessed at least a few hundred sold-out shows in the last few years. Both tourists and Vegas natives loved watching the Witches of Vegas flaunt their power on the stage. How did they do that was the most commonly asked question throughout the theater every few minutes. In all this time, not a single person figured out that Sebastian was outright telling them their secrets. Well, almost all their secrets. He never mentioned the charisma spell he placed on himself prior to each performance. A deep monotone voice boomed behind Isis. You are nervous, young one. It is useless and unnecessary. Isis peeked over her shoulder at the tall, egg-headed albino man glaring down at her. When Sebastian first introduced her to his coven, the sight of Luther scared the hell out of her. She couldn't stop gawking at his fingernails, which were longer and dirtier than anyone she'd ever known. Sasha's fake nails weren't even as long as Luther's real ones. His blackened teeth weren't easy to look at either. Years later, her throat still went dry whenever he spoke through those abnormally thin lips. It took a long time to get comfortable around him. His constant cold stare during her training sessions didn't make that task any easier. To this day, she jumped out of her shoes whenever he barked a command or a criticism. Still, the idea of having a 500-year-old vampire hanging around was kind of cool, even if he did usually act like a dick. Maybe all vampires acted like that. Not like Isis knew anyone else who was actually dead, or undead, or whatever. I'm not nervous, Isis said to him. I'm not nervous at all. You are. I can smell it. Luther's cape swung as he spun away. Concentrate on your power, and you will have no reason to be afraid. I know concentration is not your strong suit, but give it your best shot. Man, even when he gave advice, it sounded like chastising. Of course he was right. Fear was never a good emotion to have when practicing witchcraft. Actually, most emotions made her power erratic. but fear was the worst. Not that Isis was scared. She was just nervous, despite Luther's insistence they were not the same thing. Sebastian's voice boomed through the theater. Ladies and gentlemen, for the last 5.5 years, you have had the opportunity to experience the Witches of Vegas 4 nights and 3 afternoons a week, right here at the Sapphire Resort and Casino's main theater. But today, you will be the very first audience to witness something truly spectacular. Isis's shoulders tensed. A knot formed in the pit of her stomach. She had levitated many times, but never in front of more than 4 people. This time it would be in front of over 4,000 strangers. Wow, goosebumps popped all over her arms and legs. She took deep breaths, just as they taught her, in through the nose and out through the mouth. We are about to bring out our new young witch to the stage, Sebastian explained. She will have you believing that a young girl can become lighter than air. Lighter than air, Isis closed her eyes and chanted under her breath. Lighter than air. Her hands and feet tingled with each step towards the stage. The magic flowed through her veins like a shady leak from a faucet. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for the future goddess of magic, Isis.
Thank you. That was lovely. That was a great reading.
Let me just say it's not my forte. However, I do have each Witches of Vegas book out as an audio book, which is done by Jeffrey Lynn Hutchins, who, let me tell you, is way better than me. He has an amazing voice. I think people would really love to hear his rendition of the Witches of Vegas.
Well, I thought your rendition was excellent, and it definitely shows the readers that right from chapter 1, you are pulled right into the story and these characters. It's really exciting.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for joining us for A Novel Talk with Mark Rosendorf. Mark, can you tell us what's next for you and your fans? And maybe can you tell the listeners a little bit about books 3 and 4, which we haven't even talked about?
I would be happy to. Book 3 is titled Witch's Gamble. And that is actually a promise I made to myself a long time ago, that if I can come up with an original time travel story that hasn't been done before, I was going to do it. And Witch's Gamble actually has that concept where one thing is changed back in time, changes everything, and Isis has to be able to go back through everything we've seen prior, except it's after the change, so it's completely different, in order to save all of reality.
Oh, wow.
I can promise big twists in that. The 4th book is Which Way to Vegas, which, along with introducing a new enemy, which has a connection to the previous, also deals with the PTSD of everything that Isis and Zach have gone through throughout the entire series.
They're both fantastic. And book 5 is in the works, is that right?
Wiccan Mirror, that's right. And that's going to be the culmination of everything coming together.
Excellent. Listeners, you will want to check out the website markrosendorf.com for more information about this author and all of his works. Thank you to our listeners for tuning in. Be sure to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. And remember, a novel read leads to a novel talk.